Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Jeff Chapman. Today we'll be talking about implementing powerful presentation techniques. Just so you know that this presentation will be put on YouTube. So if you please hold all of your questions to the end. That way we can have a straight run through the presentation on the web, and then we'll answer all of your questions at the end. So write them down if you think you're going to forget. So there are three major aspects that we're going to talk about today in terms of powerful presentation techniques. The first of which is we want a linear presentation. We want your audience to feel like they're in a labyrinth. Now there's a difference between a labyrinth and a maze. A maze has many different paths but only one correct solution. That's not what we want. We want the audience to be on a journey on one path. So as complicated as this looks, it's really just one path that will allow the journey to become a meditation process, and they will automatically end up in the middle at the end. There are no missteps, and that's what we want. We don't want the audience going any missteps. We want them to have complete focus on the presenter and the presentation as they are one. Where I'm speaking with my image, we're as one, giving you a linked presentation between verbal and visual cues. The next thing we want to do is frame the presentation to the audience. Every presentation is different. Every audience is different. You can give the same presentation 1,000 times, 1,000 different ways, as long as you know what makes your audience particular, what makes them special, what makes them important, what their concerns are, what their needs are. So we're going to talk a little bit today about framing the presentation to the perspective of each audience. And then finally, style is inherent to the presentation. Just like your iPhone or your Android phone, the way that you manipulate that phone is inherent to the user experience of that phone. And so the aesthetics of that phone, the way it functions, the way that you use it, are all integrated. And then we want the presentation to be the same way. We want you to have a sort of a style, a sort of aesthetic that will allow people to instantly recognize one of your presentations as well, which will identify them with your message. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is the science of why linear presentations are so important. And it all begins in the brain. So this is your brain. Well, it's not technically your brain, it's a brain, but your brain looks very similar to this. And the key thing that we're focusing on is memory, because we want your audience to remember you long after they've left the room. Long after you've left this room, I want you to remember that the brain works in three major types of memory: sensory, long-term, and working memory. Sensory memory is what you touch, what you feel, what you taste, what you smell. Long-term memory is what you can remember. Maybe 20 years ago you played a baseball game and you remember that game. Maybe 30 years ago you fell in love with a girl and you remember that girl. Now, in order for sensory memory to go into long-term memory, it has to pass through what we call working memory. Working memory is that process of transferring the sensory perceptions into long-term memory. This kind of makes sense as where your touch, your feelings, what you're seeing, what you're tasting is a lot more information than you necessarily want to remember for a long time. But at the same rate, it is important for you to remember certain things for a long time. And so your brain has a process of transferring that sensory memory, what you're hearing right now, into long-term memory. And so that process works on a linear basis. So taking in sensory information, then it moves into long-term through the working is what we call threading the needle. And the best way to ensure that the information you're dispensing threads that needle is in a long linear process. Just like you're poking that thread through that needle, that thread is a long linear process. Very similar, we're going to use the voice and large images as a linear process for the presentation. This slide is the exact opposite of linear process. You've seen slides similar to this, maybe not quite this complex. I'm using it as a hyperbole. But slides like this do not instantly become recognizable to where you're supposed to look, what information I'm trying to convey. Your brain will be processing different information while I'm talking about this slide from Cordis than what I want you to be focused on. Instead, I want you to focus on large, big images like this eye through the needle. Now, think of your presentation as a train trip. Think of the presentation as going through a tunnel. I want you to think of your audience going on that trip with you, and you're always focused on exactly what's in front of you. Like in a tunnel, that you have tunnel vision. You're only focused on what's right in front of you, and it allows you to, you're not focused on scenery because it doesn't change. So you're focused on exactly what's in front of you. Similar with the presentation. The best example I can give to you of this is a story. So here's an image. Based strictly upon this image, because of the linear process of a narrative, the linear process of a story, what I can tell you about this episode of The Simpsons is that Homer decided that he was going to gain a lot of weight in order to go on disability. Once he went on disability, he had a job where he had to press buttons on a computer. The job was so easy that he had got a drinking bird to drink the water and push this button. The bird got knocked over and almost caused a meltdown. So Homer had to run to the power plant, and he saved the entire town by falling into a vat and stopping the meltdown. And then Mr. Burns paid for him to have a liposuction, so that the next week he could go back to normal. Now, the linear nature of that story allows me to remember all of that based on this one visual cue. That is the power of the combination visual cue as well as the linear nature of the story. And that's how we want your presentations to be. They probably won't be as funny as the Simpsons episode, but you can still get that information stored in the long-term memory. Okay, let's talk a couple of myths versus reality of the importance of what you've probably been taught about presentations, how people do presentations, and the best way to actually give a presentation. The first thing is reading from the screen okay? I know you've been to countless presentations where they basically turn on the PowerPoint, they turn around and they talk to the screen for an hour, then they turn around and say, does anybody have any questions? Typically, right before they do that, they say, I want this to be an interactive discussion. That's when you know it will not be an interactive discussion, and they will instantly turn around and just talk. So here's an example. I'm going to read this off the screen to you. Is the information that I'm reading to you right now difficult to pay attention to? It is too long and you're reading much faster than I'm talking? Typically it is easier to just say what you want people to understand and have them associate what you're saying than with an image or a small blurb of text. So the first thing you should have noticed is instantly you read that in between 3 times and 7 times faster than I read it. Because your ability to read silently in your head is 3 to 7 times faster than my ability to read to you. So typically when you see a bullet point, you've already read it before the person's even finished talking. So you're automatically not on the same wavelength. You're not thinking about the same thing because you're done reading it and they're still reading it to you. So you're not in that linear process. The next thing is kind of annoying. It's kind of annoying listening to me tell you things that you have already finished reading. You're thinking about the next thought. But while I'm reading and you're reading and we're not at the same rate, there is an annoyance factor involved. So that's another reason why you don't want to read off the screen. The final reason is you cannot connect with your audience if you're looking at the PowerPoint. If you're looking at the screen, if you're looking away from your audience the entire time, you will not be able to make that connection. You will not be able to emphasize the correct points. You will not be as memorable because they will tune you out, and as much reading as you do, it will not reach that long-term memory like we want. Next myth. It doesn't really matter if what I'm speaking about doesn't match what's on the screen. So here's an example. Now I'm talking to you verbally about PowerPoint presentations. And you're reading about Oklahoma's dominating offense from 2008 and Texas Tech's dominating offense from 2008 and Texas's dominating offense from 2008. You're wondering, man, the Big 12 South had some amazing offenses in 2008. But that's not what I want you to be focusing on. I want you to be focusing on better presentation techniques. So because my message, it doesn't match, I'm giving you mixed signals, is much less likely that 6 months from now, or 6 minutes from now, or even 6 days from now, you will remember anything about this slide because the messages were mixed. Finally, graphics are not important to my message. Here's an example. This is a normal rule that you'll hear all the time. No more than 7 bullet points per slide, no more than 7 words per bullet point. And that was great in 1980. This is 2011. We have new, better rules. We want giant pictures, more talk, more interaction with your audience. So you can read these 7 bullet points. Machu Picchu is really old. It's beautiful, built by the Incas. Or you can simply show this picture and then tell your audience what you want to tell them about Machu Picchu. That it's really old, that it's an ancient style of architecture that we couldn't even do anymore if we wanted to, that the Incans were wiped out by the diseases that were brought by the Spanish-speaking population. And so it frees you up to discuss what you want to talk about, answer questions, and you don't have to feel like you're checking off a list. So the second thing we're going to talk about is focusing on our audience. This is the Cliff Atkinson Beyond Bullet Point method. It is a 5-slide introduction to allow you to ensure that your audience knows that you're focused on them from the very beginning. First, they want to know who they are, but in reality it's who you think they are. They want to know what the situation they're in. They want to know where they are. They want to know that you know what they want, and they want to know that you know how to get them there. So it's 5 initial slides right out of the gate. Not talking about your vast experience, not talking about how many things you've done so great, not talking about you, you're talking about them, their problems, their solutions, and how you can make their solutions better, how you can eliminate their problems, how you can resist the uncertainty that they're facing. So for example, here's 5 slides that I would design for our company to show why I think we want to have this utilized in our presentations. So first of all, who are we? We're an architecture firm. We are in competition daily with other architects. We use presentations all the time. That's our best way of getting our message across in interviews and at conferences, talking about sustainable design, talking about our expertise as architects, talking about all of the great buildings we've done. However, our presentations are designed for speed because we are constantly on a deadline for something else. Typically they get done at the last minute. These presentations are not done for impact. So we are here to help you frame your conversations, frame your presentations, frame your messages to the audience that you're speaking to. Now, those 5 slides, which is actually technically 6 slides, are to show that you have some concept of why you should get hired, why you should be listening to, why this whole presentation is important. It starts from the very beginning, showing a little bit of empathy for your audience, showing that you have some kind of understanding of why they need to be listening to you. Sometimes it's as simple as they need a CEU. Sometimes it's as simple as they're just trying to learn something to get a check mark filled in on an application. Sometimes they're trying to hire you to design a building for them. Sometimes they're trying to actually learn how to become a better architect or presenter or something that is a skill that they're working on. So it's important that you understand every audience is different and try to tailor somewhat to the audience so that they feel appreciated. It will make them more invested, more involved, and more interested in the rest of the things you want to say. So the third thing we're going to talk about is style. And the first image I have up here is Mies van der Rohe, famous for saying less is more. And that's absolutely true with most things. There's a line that says things should be as simple as possible and no simpler. Never better than in a PowerPoint presentation. One large image, no text. I know exactly what I need to say about it because I remember the Mies van der Rohe quote, less is more. How do we do that best? One big thought per slide, one giant image, one giant word, one thought per slide. Now, once you start doing multiple bullet points, that's multiple thought per slide. Those individual bullet points can easily be broken down into their own slides. Tell stories. Stories are automatically linear. Stories are memorable. How many of you remember Dr. Seuss? How many of you remember the lessons that were taught via the narratives of the Lorax or Yertle the Turtle? Stories are very important in leaving an indelible impression on your audience. A blank slide. A blank slide can focus the attention away from visual, and they will focus entirely on the auditory. So you have something very important that you want to say to the audience, to be 100% focused on what you're going to say, not show, put up a blank slide. So the last thing we're going to talk about in terms of specific style points is the fourth item of our presentation, which is some presenters that you can go look at who have distinctive styles that are tailored to their message. The first is Lawrence Lessig. Lawrence Lessig is an IT guy. He's now running the rootstrikers.org, trying to get money out of politics. His message is we're trying to get money out of politics so that the power of the electoral process can go back where it belongs, with the people. And so he uses presentations with literally one word at a time, or a point. Whenever he wants to make a point, his slide only shows a point. Nancy Girardi, written countless how to make beautiful slides books such as Resonate, Slideology. Nancy Girardi is critical in understanding the beautiful nature of infosthetics, the aesthetics of information, also infographics. There's nothing worse than looking at unbeautiful slides. It makes you less engaged, less interested in the information that's being presented. Gar Reynolds has a series of books focused on kind of the zen of the presentation, another kind of less is more approach, but he gives a little bit more practical guidance on how to do the less is more approach. And then Guy Kawasaki believes that you can do any presentation that you need to be effective with 10 slides in less than 20 minutes, and no font on any screen should be less than 30. So you can see right here, that 10 minutes is written in 10 font, the 20 minutes is written in 20 font, the 30 is written in 30 font. So you can, if your audience is older, the larger you can make the text, the easier they can read it. If you have an audience that can't read what is on your slide, like if you have yellow yellow text on white background, no one can read it, they're just going to turn off. They're going to say, why is this guy here wasting my time? So thank you very much for your attention. We're going to spend the next few minutes focusing on questions that you may have about this process. And I want to thank you for coming out today.